Hi, this is Paul. I wanted to do a little video responding to comments. Now, some of these types of comments have been around ever since I started on the YouTube channel. You can find them on Twitter. They rise and fall. I think they're just part of the process and part of the conversation. Lately, a little bit more on, let's say, this little corner. The title I gave for that little video that I released before I could jump into the commentary on the Peterson, Peugeot, and Vervaeke conversation, the most important Jordan Peterson video since the biblical series. Well, but fair enough to back that up. Now, obviously not, that's my opinion. It's funny that I sometimes feel I have to say that as if it isn't blatantly obvious that it's my opinion. Who else's opinion would it be on my channel? And, that sort of brings me to, again, the Peterson, Ian McGilchrist conversation, where the literal internet is something that's really hilarious, because it's just sort of a dynamic that takes hold of the internet. And you pull back and look at context, you'd say, well, Paul Vanderklay thinks that conversation with Jordan and Jonathan and John is important. I noted on Twitter the other day, my sister, who has a channel where she talks about decorating, has a very different channel than mine. My sister has absolutely zero interest in this conversation with Jordan, Jonathan, and John. The vast majority of the world, Jordan Peterson may have 5 million plus YouTube subscribers, but regularly, if you bump into a person on the street and you say Jordan Peterson, they're not going to know who he is. I mean, it's an awfully little corner of the world here, this little corner of the internet, and it's interesting and important. We have our tempests in teacups. Now, this isn't anything new. I'm a pastor in the Christian Reformed Church. I'm used to tempests in teacups. Recently on CRC Voices, Pete from Edmonton wrote a little posting when he was talking to someone who was recalling this split in the Dutch Reformed Church in the Netherlands in 1944 under the German occupation over presumptive regeneration. And people were sort of aghast at, with everything going on in terms of the Nazi occupation, the thing that you're going to focus on, oh little church, is this theological controversy? And the answer is yes. This is what people do. Now, I want to respond to some of these types of comments. I wanted to do it in a video because I generally speaking, have a rule of myself on Twitter. I don't do back and forth, because it's pointless on Twitter. Twitter is a little space and you get a little moment, and quite frankly, it's better off if we keep Twitter a little lighthearted, because all this angsty drama on Twitter just reveals to me people's inability to look at what Ian McGilchrist would say, right-brained contextual apprehension, perhaps. Twitter is a little space on the internet where you can write a selective number of characters, and there it is. So this very thing's quite as ephemeral as a tweet. So I don't do back and forth on Twitter, and I usually scan or read the comment section. I can't say that I catch all the comments. It very much depends on how much time I have in any given day to sort of peruse comments and read them. The comments are comments, and I very much appreciate them. And actually, I learn a lot from the comments, but even though, let's say, Mark Lefevre writes extremely meaty comments, and he does, and his comments are very worth reading because he really goes into depth on the comments. The comment section is just a difficult place for me to interact with people in a really determined way. So when I don't know, looking around and say, maybe it's good to make a little video about responding to a few points. And, maybe I can have some more substantive conversations with some of these individuals later on. I know this summer I haven't been doing randos conversations just because my travel schedule is so demanding. That means that all of my work gets compressed into these few little weeks. And that means that can't do randos conversations. But after September, things should hopefully slow down, and we'll have more time for more conversations. So Nate has been getting more and more visible. Nate, who was banned twice from the Bridges of Meaning Discord server. It's one thing to get banned by Joey. A lot of people have been banned by Joey, but Nate had the distinction of getting banned by Job. And if you get Job that upset, you must have really done something. And so Nate has been on again, off again. And Nate's, how can I say it, Nate's had a rather chaotic 5 years on the internet, and I was first introduced to him when he had a very heartwarming video as he's a young guy, and the cake isn't baked if you're only 22 or 23 years old, so cut him some slack. But he had a very lovely video that he'd posted on a channel about how he became a Christian because of Jordan Peterson, and then he went to a church, and then he had a falling out with his church, and then he wasn't a Christian, then he was kind of a Christian, and I don't even know his status right now in terms of the Christian thing, but he spends time, a lot of paying attention a lot to apologetics and philosophy, and before he was studying coding, he was working in software engineering or something like that, doing computer coding, and now he's a philosophy student, and a lot of times his comments on Twitter and in the comment section, and he makes full-blown videos, has these long conversations and live streams on his channel. Most of his comments seem to boil down to, "You're not doing it right," which is not an unusual comment. And, it doesn't mean we are doing it right, but it really depends on what it is that we are doing right and wrong. And that's really the heart of this video, because I thought, given all the ups and downs over the last 4 or 5 years and the development of this little corner of the internet and the Thunder Bay Conference, and I think it's worth just once again reminding ourselves what the it is that we are doing. Now, "you're not doing it right" critique is usually based on what someone believes the relevant it is. And for Nate right now, it is philosophy. And so he's a philosophy student. And part of the wonder of being a philosophy student is that you sit at the feet of all these philosophy professors, and you read these great books, and you look at these great names, and you're in love with philosophy, and so you're really passionate about philosophy, and you care about philosophy, and you're drunk in the heady wines of philosophy, and all of that is a wonderful thing. It happens to theological students, it happens to art students, it happens to students all over the place. Students should be drunk with the wine of whatever discipline they are indulging in at the moment. That's a very fine and good thing. But again, you're not doing it right. All depends on what it is. And as is often the case, if you're a student, you sort of look all around, and to the guy with a hammer, everything's a nail, and to the philosophy student, everything's philosophy, and to the theology student, everything's theology, and that's just sort of the way that goes in life. And what's interesting is that you get almost nearly the same kinds of critiques from religious people. If you're a Calvinist, well, Jordan Peterson fails Calvinism in these ways. And if you're Orthodox, Jordan Peterson fails Orthodoxy in these ways. And maybe you like him because of his politics, and maybe you hate him because of his politics, and on and on and on and on. Jordan Peterson's doing what Jordan Peterson's been doing for a very long time. And he's going to keep doing it because that's just kind of who he is and what he's about. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. And it's the same thing for Peugeot and Vervaeke and for myself. And so we're not doing it right. Well, a lot depends on exactly what that it is, because the truth is we are not primarily doing academic philosophy, nor are we trying to do. We are not really doing theology, nor are we trying to do. John Vervaeke in his day job does cognitive science in the academy. And the irony is that "you're not doing it right" is probably the preeminent complaint in the academy, because the academy is just basically a warren of quarrels. That's what you do. You have arguments, and you go back and forth, and you debate, and you try to establish rules, and on you go. But then the academy's different. That's just the nature of the beast. So there you have it. And it's not just Nate that's made comments like this. I mean, these comments are all over the place. And so whenever I hear many comments, I listen to it and I think, well, that's the you're not doing it right critique. And that has just about everything to say about what someone imagines it is. I'm a pastor, and I try to be very clear about that. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a biblical scholar. I do theology as part of my pastoral work. I study the Bible as part of my pastoral work. I'm not a philosopher, although I love wisdom, and I think the love of wisdom and the pursuit of wisdom is what this little corner of the internet is about. But the love of wisdom and the pursuit of wisdom is not exactly the same as the modern academic discipline of philosophy, or theology, or education, or psychology, or cognitive science, or. So Jonathan Peugeot, Jordan Peterson, and John Vervaeke are not academic philosophers. John Vervaeke does have a degree in philosophy, but what he's really working to pursue is sort of a historical applied love of wisdom that's much more fundamental to the project that he's engaging in. And critiques, of course, almost always say as much or more about the source as the target. And I've critiqued plenty on this channel, and, well, it's my opinion. Again, given that it's on the Paul Vanderklay channel, that should be exactly what you expect. And if you want my opinion, listen. If you don't want my opinion, there's a few other channels on YouTube that you can listen to. And there's a few other bearded and clean-shaven heads that will certainly share with you their ideas and opinions for hours and hours and hours on end on YouTube and Twitch, and on we go. And that's just sort of what we're doing when we're doing this. And again, as I said, this is similar to religious people critique. That's what religious people do. Experts who critique. Well, they're an expert in this thing, and you're not doing it right, whatever this little field of expertise is. Randos who critique. The critique is out there, and we'll critique the critique. The second comment that's arisen since I've been talking a little bit about abstraction, and I value these comments and I listen to these comments, but this is actually something that I've discussed and addressed with many people over the course of this 4 years, because they'd say, well, there's just so much talking. It's kind of like opening up a book and saying, well, there's just so many words and pictures and pages. Well, that's what a book is. There's not a lot of other things but talking that you can do sort of in this little space. This is a video. This is a podcast. This is talking. I could hum. I could do lots of other things, but this is just sort of about talking. Now, as we get into the abstract and the concrete, you're critiquing abstraction with abstraction. Yep. That's just sort of the way that this goes. I can't give you much concrete because you're looking at a little screen. And this is the heart of the critique. This is a little diagram that that I can't say his name because we kept his conversation quiet, but he sends me a lot of stuff on Twitter, and it's up there. But you have the concrete, and then you go sort of into the conceptualization so that you can work on it. And it's the conceptualizations that we easily put into words and pass back and forth over the internet, or write into books, or put into arguments and all of this stuff. It's not the concrete. I can talk about fatherhood, but the concrete father that I am doesn't really pass into the screen. I can talk about church, but it's the conceptualization, and it's the words and all of these things. Abstraction is an enormously powerful thing that can be transmitted by words, but again, it's to a certain degree always limited, because if all of that abstraction is going to become once again concrete and land and change the world in a very powerful way, it has to come down, which is again why in Christianity you have the incarnation, where the word becomes flesh. And Jesus' resurrection isn't just sending out an idea about something. There's something fundamental in the resurrection about the concrete nature of it. Now, you might believe it and you might not believe it, but that's actually the participation in this whole division between the abstract and the concrete that's really quite vital when it comes to the resurrection. Same with Jesus and his life, and same with the church. We can talk about the church and write about the church and do all of those things. All of that abstraction is good and fine, but at some point it has to be brought down and made flesh, made concrete, done with action. But those actions, maybe you can see a representation of it on YouTube, but even a building. You're looking at a screen, and I feel this in my hand, but you can't feel it because we've got this little 2D representation in the words. So on one hand, we have these enormously powerful tools like words. On the other hand, they're still just words, and we're dealing with conceptualizations and abstractions and critiques, and it's just all it is, because that's all that can be transmitted by YouTube or podcasts or blogs or writing or books, or that's just the nature of this thing. There's no escaping it. The screen doesn't adequately represent the concrete. Screens deliver representations, which are in many ways abstractions and molded abstractions. It's sort of like saying the problem with this book is that you have all these pages and words, and yep, that's what a book is. So your comment relies on abstraction. A concrete representation would be to leave the screen or podcast completely, and I'd never know it. But that wouldn't feel good, because you had all of this angst bottled up inside you because I wasn't doing it right, and so you had to leave the comment. And I'm glad that you do. At the end of almost all my videos, I say, leave a comment. Keep the conversation going, but it's going to be an abstraction. It's going to be a conceptualization. It's going to be a critique. It's going to be a judgment. And all of that doesn't really mean much, because it's just thinky, talky, wordy stuff, unless and until it actually comes into your life. And what do I mean? In a concrete way, in what you do, in what you, in how you love. And when I say that, I don't mean how you feel inside. I mean the actions you actually do towards others in the world. But yet, here we are on these little screens and these little podcasts doing this thing. It's not a bad thing, but it is in and of itself not the goal. The goal is a transformed life in real things. I just actually, Karen sent me something from the meaning code that should probably just drop in here, because I thought it was a cool idea of this.
According to the Google search that I did at that time, it cost $2.5 million, and that's $1,300 per kilo. You're driving it, very excited because you have like this $2.5 million car that you just got, and boom, you crash it against a wall. You don't need a PhD in economics to know that the value of that car decreased sharply, not because you drove it out of the lot, but because you drove it into a wall. Like, this is a crash that only rearranged the way in which those atoms were connected. So what we're destroying here is physical order. What we're destroying here is information. So what this teaches us is that this car was actually made of information, and that the value of that car was connected to that physical order. But to understand what's so special about that physical order, we need to compare apples and apples. And the true difference between these two types of apples is not their price or their complexity, because I can very easily argue that the apple on the right is much more complex than the apple of the left, because the molecular mechanisms that the apple on the right uses to build itself are far superior than any of the mechanisms that are available inside, that silicon apple.
Great illustration.
The true difference between these two apples is that the first apple existed first in the world and then in our heads. There was a world in which there were apples and there was no word for apple. The second apple is an apple that existed first in someone's head and then in the world. And what that tells us is that these products are not just made of physical order, but they're made of crystallized imagination, which is order that was originally formed on mental computations, and then we disembodied into a product. So let's think of international trade now that we understand products as embodiments of information and imagination. And here
I got distracted because I was making this video, and then I was going to go to my history because I just watched that, and Grim Grizz was live streaming, and he was talking about my conversation with Peugeot, and so I jumped in there and had a moment with Grim, and Lynn Lavoie was there, and Sally dropped in, so it was a nice moment. But I like how Hidalgo mentions the apple and the apple, and the real things are things that are more real in more in at more layers and in more levels are just simply more real. And the more layers and levels you can stack up upon them, they are more real. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, engineers at Microsoft, Apple, Intel, they've had many, many ideas, but until you can put that down into the world, we don't value them as much. And again, and I like the apple was in the world and then it was in our head. Or actually, that's not true, because the apple that was in the world that has become, in many ways, that big shiny red apple that comes from Washington State that is large and delicious, is actually a product of our imaginations. Because if you go all the way across the world and you find how apples started, just like how corn started and how all these, doesn't look anything like that big shiny apple that looks like it's been made. So little pushback there, but the point is, the goal of all of this. I should just play a little bit of that grim Grizz thing. I couldn't get back to the beginning, so back onto this. But anyway, Grizz was doing a little bit of clipping and weaving of the message of this video, which was exactly on the same point that I was making here, which is the whole point of all of this stuff is not to just rearrange the thoughts in your mind, but to have it spill out into the real world of real relationships and concrete objects and this meat space. That's the whole point of all of this stuff. Third critique that I hear all the time is non-experts shouldn't be platformed by YouTube, or at least they shouldn't be popular. So the Chris Kavanaugh and some of that stuff going on, or at least other people shouldn't listen to them, because you wouldn't complain if you didn't know about them, which means you've given them attention too, and clicks and attention. See, the truth is, if you really don't want to, if you're in this game of competition with a critic, the absolute best thing you can do is completely ignore them. That's the absolute best thing you can do. Don't give them any attention, because especially if the critic is has a smaller channel, you're just giving the critic just helps them. And so I don't mind talking about Nate. Go ahead and watch Nate's channel. I think what Nate is doing is really important. It's part of Nate's growing up. Now he should turn off the computer and not have long times on the internet, but hey, it's his choice. If he wants to do that, he's going to do that. You get blessed or you pay for the choices that you make. That's how choices work. So I'm not in any way, have no animosity towards Nate, or if Chris Kavanaugh wanted to critique me as some guru, but the channel's small. And again, there are times when I think, oh, wouldn't it be great if this channel was much larger? But there are many other times when I think, I'm sure glad my channel isn't that large, because it's much more fun to, have Nate critique me and then talk to him about it. And I feel just tremendously grateful that I get to, that even though my limited hierarchy doesn't bind and blind me, that, as I mentioned in the Peugeot video, I don't have enough chance to pay personal attention to everyone, because every individual you meet is a well of potential combinatorial explosiveness in terms of your relationship with them. And we are limited creatures, and many of us, at least at this time in our life, we have wives and sons and daughters and friends and churches and jobs and all of these things that demand our attention far more than the relationships we have via these little online things. And just in terms of a person's health, you really have to figure out how to mediate that sort of thing. Now, I always chuckle at this critique, because did you ever look at YouTube? The whole idea of social media is that people who have not been vetted by the gatekeepers get a chance to have their little say, and 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million suddenly become a little bit more famous, or maybe a lot famous, and everybody starts listening to them for what it's worth. That's just the nature of this entire game. And on one hand, the game is fun. Maybe 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, we'll look at it and say that was a bad idea. And I think David Fuller's done a good job of talking about established media and emergent media and all of these things. And if I didn't think this emergent media was valuable, I wouldn't do what I do with it. So yeah, non-experts, that's what YouTube is. And I learn a ton from people on YouTube. And is there more information on YouTube that's wrong than right? Probably. But generally speaking, a lot of people go to YouTube for how-to videos. There's a how-to video and you try it and it doesn't really work. Then you find another how-to video and you find another how-to video, or you look at product reviews, or you listen to people's ideas. And this is the way life works. And it's in some ways sort of the strange extrapolation of what's normal, because if you needed a how-to thing, well, maybe you'd stop in at the hardware store and look for someone who seems to know what they're doing and ask them, and maybe you'll get an answer and maybe you won't. But the amount of time that it'll take to go and find all of those experts in real life, well, maybe that'll be more valuable. It's just impossible to know. Combinatorial explosiveness just happens all over the place. Now, the idea that non-experts shouldn't be platformed by YouTube basically is a pointing to the medieval Roman Catholic imprimatur that happens basically just as the printing press started. And, in some ways, the Roman Catholic Church, and I'm sure many others, began to have a little bit of existential panic. Oh no, printers will print wrong things. And how are we going to stop them from printing? And then you'll find things like Bloody Kansas. Bloody Kansas started because they had a raid on somebody else's printing press. We must shut them down. Well, the printing press could outprint book burnings, and the internet far outspans and outspeeds the chance to destroy information. So just look up imprimatur and review its history a little bit. It didn't work. Now we still have authorities, and we should look to authorities, but all of that entire situation is just so more dynamic. So every time I hear someone like, non-experts shouldn't be platformed. Okay, so yeah, it's just this knowledge tyranny that people want to set up, and so you really want to go back to that, do you? I don't think so. So what is happening here? I think, you're doing it wrong. Or what was the second one again? There's too much abstraction. There's too much talking. Nobody knows what they're doing. What are we doing here? Well, what Jordan was doing in that room, and he had a list of ideas and he wanted to talk to his friends about it. And he's had plenty of conversations with John and Jonathan off the camera. And in fact, in my conversation with Jonathan the other day, we probably had nearly as much conversation off the camera as we had on the camera. Now and then suddenly when I tell you that, people are like, oh, I want to know what you talked about off the camera. Off the record, off the recording. I want to know. It wasn't thrilling. It was mostly personal. Just checking in on each other. How you doing? And that kind of thing is vitally important. Not everything should be on the internet or on YouTube, but we're all blessed by the fact that we've got these cameras, and they had good sound in this recording, and they shared their conversation with us. And again, my sister, who likes decorating, will pay no attention to this. My mother will pay no attention to this. My wife will pay no attention to this. My children will pay no attention to this. My church will pay no attention to this. I pay attention to it because, well, I've now sort of intertwined in a narrative way my life with these individuals, and I found in them ideas and relationships and networks, and overall, over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a very positive thing. And so that's what I do. And I sort of pay attention to the status of the community. A pastor is sort of like a sheepdog. We just sort of run around, and we're always not only focusing on the individual sheep, but we're focusing on the flock and the flock of the sheep. That's what pastors do. And so I saw this. Oh, it's good. They're talking, the three of them. Oh, this is exciting. And Jordan's well. This is exciting. And everybody's smiling and comfortable, and they're in a comfortable place, and they're having water, and they're all wired up, and the sound is going to be good. And yeah, there'll be plenty of stuff that the camera doesn't cover. That's all fine. But this is exciting. This is some of what we've wanted. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that all of these little bids that we have with each other. Now, most of them, best friend, you can probably only have one. It's the nature of a hierarchy. Spouse, wife, lover, you should only have one. It's the nature of the ideal. You should only have, you don't have your room in your life for everything, but every chance conversation, and Peterson talked about this with, I don't remember if it was this video or the Gilchrist video. I think it was the Gilchrist video. You do it in a way that maybe there'll be another. Maybe this person will be a friend. I was driving home and I was thinking about my friendship with Rick. A lot of my friendship with Rick has developed because, well, Rick's been a real servant for Living Stones, and he's here every Sunday, and he helped us with this and he helped us with that, and it's been a, Rick has become a wonderful friend in my life, to the point that we're seeing if he can get a passport to go to Thunder Bay, because lots of other people would like to meet Rick. And Rick's a pretty quiet guy. He really is. At most of our meetups, he kind of hangs back. He doesn't say a lot, but I've really come to love and cherish Rick. And that's a really cool thing. But relationships are like that. They grow, and they grow because of all the concrete particularities and all of the combinatorial explosiveness in something. And then I'm excited to go to Thunder Bay because I'm finally going to meet Jonathan Peugeot, who I've had a number of conversations that I've listened to plenty, and I'm finally going to meet in the flesh. And I'm finally going to meet in the flesh John Vervaeke, and we're going to play. I was just on Grimm's channel. He said, "Paintball for Jesus is no more. Now it's airsoft." Oh, shoot. I forgot. It equals fast. So Grimm is going to have to put it in the comments. But I'm gonna, and some of you that I've had a little bit on chat, and the frustration, because, again, of the distortion, I talked to Jonathan about this. The distortion of this cool tool that we're using right here is that the combinatorial explosiveness of your glory will be insufficiently manifest to me. Also a bunch of the crudiness. But each of you is an image bearer of God. And in whatever way, there's a degree of potential in you that is absolutely glorious and magnificent. It may probably never be reached, certainly not to its fullest potential, not in this dispensation, in this world. But what interactions are is the chance to meet and shake hands, have a little conversation. And there's all this real chemistry that happens in real life. Maybe I met Paul, but it was a disappointment after listening to him. Or I met this person, and it was better meeting them than watching them on screen. And I didn't get much of a chance to talk to them, but who knows? Maybe. And that's part of my longing, and Christianity affords this, is that when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. And part of that singing God's praise is growing in relationship with one another and discovering the potential and the glory of God that is built into each image bearer. And discovering where then those relationships go. C.S. Lewis had the inklings, of course, and when Charles Williams died, I hope I'm getting the name right, Lewis reflected the fact that when he died, he took a part of each of them and the inklings with him. Why? Because when he was there, he unlocked something in Lewis that wasn't there without him. And that's what relationships are like. So what is happening here? We're talking and we're exploring and we're sharing notes, and and that's why critique is fine. Critique is absolutely fine. It's just better critique is better. You're not doing it right. Not a great critique. It's all thinky-talky. Yeah, that's true, but that's pretty much what we can do with these little screens. And you're not an expert, so I don't listen to you. Well, don't listen to them then. Go find whatever little imprimatur or hierarchy structure or little in-group that you accept the authority of and devote yourself to that. God bless you in that journey. No problem with that. But those little critiques, they don't do much. And partly because a really able critique is one that not only is salient to you and clear to you, but is also clear and salient to the person that you intend to deliver this little rare jewel to. Because then you have, as Vervaeke says, dialogos. Now we're watching the logos through the conversation, and you and I are seeing the same thing, and we leave the conversation both blessed. You might be blessed because you had this jewel that you gave to another, and it's more blessed to give than to receive. But maybe you receive the critique or the comment or the correction. You say, oh, wow, now you're a better person. Read the book of Proverbs, it talks about this. So what's happening here is that we are seeking truth together, we're seeking beauty together, we're seeking goodness together, and we're seeking each other, and we're seeking to create body, as we've been talking about. We're seeking to create fellowship, and that's why I love the way the video ended, because they said, what we've had here is fellowship. Ah, yes, you've had fellowship. Something helpful has happened between you. Now, there may be fights and there may be all of these things, but it's not just the, oh, now I have more knowledge, or now I have my philosophy right, or now I have my thinking right, or now I... No. Again, I'm throughout the week as I ponder my sermon. I usually read the text early in the week, and I do a little bit of spade work and look at the Greek and read some commentaries, and then I mull on it during the week, and this word that Paul uses. The Corinthians are they're divided. That's such a weak word. They're split up. He says what you really need to do is be mended together, to be fit together, to come together into one body that is so much more than Voltron. One body which does so much more, because all of the nuances of the interrelationships. When I'm listening to you, it affords a part of me that is connected to you that I can't access in any other way. Now, again, in our limited time frames, we just begin to taste this. But I believe. This is why I'm a Christian. This is part of it. But this is why the beauty of life together into the future, beyond death, fellowship that is not interrupted by the grave, that is so powerful. And part of the reason why I will not give up my faith is everything else looks less than that. And you might say, well, will Vervaeke be in the new heavens and new earth? I hope so. Because there's a lot in John that I've really grown to love. Well, would Jordan be in the new heavens and the earth? I hope so. Because there's a lot in Jordan I've grown to love. Well, would Jonathan Pajot be there? Well, I hope so. God gets to take this, to me, as part of Calvinism. God gets to collect from us who he wants around the table for this fellowship. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that great? Isn't that awesome? I'm thrilled with the idea and the vision of it, and I'm just using these names because you know them. But this is what we're seeking. That we find each other, that we know each other, that we love each other, that we can create between us fellowship and body among us, that we become knit together towards something that we can't begin to attain in our tiny little lifespans with all of our limitations and all of these constraints. Now, will there be constraints in the new heavens and new earths? Probably. Constraints deliver meaning, and it'll be very meaningful. So how? I don't know. I'm not God. A God who can make a world as glorious and wonderful as this. And be able to use the wonder and the good things and the bad things from this world. Yes, I'm confident. I'm confident. Again, this is what Christianity is supposed to deliver in us: a faith and a confidence and a desire and a hunger for fellowship that goes further up and further in. Yeah, this got me preaching. So, yeah, you're not doing it right. No, this is the it I want to do. This is the it. And I don't want just a little to fix up my philosophy a little bit, but that'd be a fine thing, or fix up my theology, or fix up my knowledge of psychology, or fix up data or information. I want to grow in fellowship with others so that, to the degree that whatever happens between us, that the glory of God in them and the glory of God in me comes together, and a greater glory is made by that interaction. That's why we talk. Because, well, there is enough power in that kind of interchange to well be worth the time. But again, it's all pointing to something that's far beyond what we can know and taste and realize right here and now. And it isn't really about politics. You know, being in a democracy means everybody gets to play, as long as you follow the rules. Well, what rules? Well, don't smack anybody. Don't hurt anybody. Play fair. Play, do the right thing with each other. Use your words. That's fine. Is the political Jordan my favorite Jordan? No. But does he get to use his channel to tell his politics? Yes. The irony that I see in that is people who would be all terribly upset about the kinds of tyranny that, let's say, the Roman Catholic Church had over medieval Europe, as if they had anywhere near the means of control that are available in the 20th and 21st century that we see burgeoning among us. Want people shut down. Really? That's what you want? If you don't like what Jordan says, don't watch. The government isn't pumping him into your house. Oh, they're doing it wrong. He's doing it wrong. Well, let him do it wrong. We're almost all doing almost everything wrong. People don't learn to do it a little better until they have some practice trying and failing. It's the way it goes. And the part of the beauty of the space is that the politics of Jordan or Jonathan or John Vervaeke and I aren't aligned at all. I don't talk a lot about politics here, not because I don't participate in the democracy and I don't vote, but because I have limited amounts of time to talk, and I want to talk about what I think is far more interesting than politics. Far more interesting, far more enduring, far more fascinating, something through which I can create bonds with other people, that I can create bodies with other people that would be more enduring, because politics is now and religion is always. So much of the pushback, so much of the drama on Twitter or the drama on YouTube is all about all these little culture war nuggets. Do you mean you believe in presumptive generation? Do you mean you don't believe in presumptive generation? Jonathan Edwards, one of the premier philosophers of his day, especially here in the Americas, was kicked out of his church over a fight as to whether or not the children and grandchildren of non-participating people would be allowed in the church. No, we don't want Jonathan Edwards as our preacher anymore. Who did you get instead? Was it an upgrade? I doubt it. It's the nature of us. We have these spats over all sorts of things, and we're all possessed by them. So in in 1 Corinthians 1, where Paul is talking about the strife and the fighting between them, he uses the word of the Greek god Eris. Eris is the female brother of Ares, maybe it's Ares, with an E, who is the goddess of strife. There's no temples to her because nobody wanted her, because she's always there with us, causing us all this strife between us. Oh, I can't stand to listen to Jordan. Oh, I can't stand to listen to Sam Harris. Oh, I can't. I just saw Sam Harris on trigonometry. Thought, oh, I want to listen to that. Now, am I going to be critical? Probably. I'm working on that. Some of you have admonished me about the critical spirit that I have towards Sam Harris. Others of you are like, no, go after him. He's a knucklehead. Oh, fine. Part of not battling with flesh and blood is we're all possessed by these different spirits that go back and forth. And let's deal with the spirits. So, yeah, this little corner has never been about politics, and although everybody has their political idea, and I don't want it to be. And I've got to, many of you have challenged me on, okay, well, you've got these ideas. Well, what about the application of them? Well, what does your channel, what does the privilege of having a channel with 20,000 subscribers, as if that was a big number, demand of you or require of you? What responsibility do you have? Yada, yada, yada. I don't know. Think about those ideas. Symbolic World just had a piece written on Augustine and City of God. City of God, was very politically motivated when you wrote it. And of course, there you very much had, there was pre-secularization, so it was all much more together. So what is it that we're trying to do? Well, how did it all begin? Well, this Poe the person said it very well to me. Came for the culture war, stayed for the religion. There's a lot of people in that group. Yeah, the culture war gets our attention. We have all these ideas, all these emotions, all these things, and here's Jordan on the university campus, and here he is listening to his critics, listening carefully. He's going to have strong words back. He plays the game well. Played the game very well. The man and the moment meet for this popular University of Toronto psychology prof and clinical psychologist, two professions that have been taken from him. And a lot of people critique when I say that, but no. One of my favorite Jordans was the classroom lecture Jordan. To watch him do his thing in class, he was a master college professor, challenging young people on all sorts of things, and people left the classroom inspired towards all sorts of things. And there's David Fuller was talking about that. You can find many people have had him in class, and he's an amazing professor, and he's a clinical psychologist. And part of what I love about him is when he tells the stories as a clinical psychologist. Can he do that given everything that's happened? No, probably not. This stage in his life, probably not. So what's he going to do? Public intellectual, what does that mean? Daily Wire, what's that about? I mean, he's got to make this stuff up. I mean, Brett Weinstein's in similar thing. Peter Boghossian's in similar things. It's not unusual to pastors. Pastors are in many ways used to the kind of confessional knife fighting, but now the confessionality is out there in the rest of the world. I think a lot of people fail to understand the center of his mission. At least my take on the center of his mission is to rescue individuals from nihilism. And you can see that when he breaks down on camera, when he talks about people coming to him, explaining how watching his videos or reading his books or listening to his admonitions have made their individual life better and their relationships. It's in the concrete. Their relationship with their father, relationship with their mother, their job at work, their relationship with their spouse. They built a family. They've done something. They brought concreteness into the world, and they are improved. And for him, there's no greater validation of all of the effort that he has put forward and what he has suffered and lost. That's the center of him. He's not fundamentally a political figure. He's doing that. And again, in a democracy, you get to play the game. But I don't think that's the center of him. The center of him is rescuing individuals, and his whole ideas about individualism, and I mean, all of that comes together. That's his worldview. That's his mission. That's his passion. That's his glory. Helping individuals do better. As a clinical psychologist, a lot of this is, as is almost any in the case of any pastor or psychologist or guru or helper, he discovered this path and walked this path because he had to do it for himself, and he shares what he learns with others. Now, good, bad, right, or wrong, agree, disagree, that's what he's done. As a clinical psychologist healing himself, he marshaled the forces of meaning against pervasive suffering of the world experienced by individuals. Drag that cross uphill. Clean your room. Stop whining. And, very moving in the story of him and his daughter, Michaela. And, it's an amazing story how, especially in this context, a lot of people, you would expect Michaela to be probably dead, frankly, by this point. Poor me. I can't do anything. Do this for me. Do that for me. No, Michaela, take the bull by the horns. You've been dealt a rough hand. Get after it. And she has. Look at what she's done. You might say, well, she's famous because her daddy was famous. Oh, sure, but she had an opportunity and she took it and she's done stuff with it. And she's her own person, and she's exploring Christianity, and, good on her. And that's from him. And, it's the center of his mission. It's what he's about. Everybody gets to have a politics, and everybody gets to have the center of your mission. I always got an interesting friend, this icon carver. I didn't even know that was a job. I do now. He's got his own story. What happened in Quebec with the fall of the Roman Catholic Church, and his parents become evangelicals, and what a fascinating backdrop and context for someone. And then art school, and that's where he learns about postmodernity, and he goes to Africa, and Mennonite Central Committee, and wants to help develop the artists and craftsmen there, and he learns from them, many, many, many things, and he has dramatic stories, as many missionaries do, and he has a brother, and he and his brother just have all these ideas, and they explore the world, and his brother writes a book, and he talks about these things, and he lectures about these things, and that's why he's attracted to orthodoxy and icon carving, and the world turns, and suddenly people start to understand what this strange man is saying, and it's really cool. And then sometimes he gets to share the stage with his friend, and he and his friend have different opinions about all sorts of things, but they have a friendship. Everybody should have a friend. There are few sadder things in life than to go through this world never having had a friend. People are all obsessed about, do you have a sexual partner? Do you have sexual gratification? Well, yeah, sex is fine. It's a good thing. But friendship. Tolkien knew this. It's built deeply into Lord of the Rings. Friendship. Sam and Frodo. His friendship with Gandalf. His friendship with Aragorn. His friendship with Merry and Pippin. Friendship. Tolkien knew this. Lewis knew this. Charles William knew this. Dyson knew this. Friendship. What's Peugeot's main message? Go to church. Go to church. Do the liturgy. Get a good one. Jonathan, you can go back to our first conversation. I want to ask you about your liturgy. I said, it's a mess. It's a function of the body and the relationships that I'm embedded in and living stones. It is going to be a mess. It's Christian reformity with, all the added idiosyncrasies of the people here. Now, if I were to start it again, I might do it differently. If I were to start it again and I'd do it differently today than I would have 3 years ago. But it's the work of the church and the work of the people, not the work of Paul Vanderklay. The church is not me. If the church is me, it can't be the gift to me that it is, because it's full of all these other people and all these other fellowships and all of this body that is the church, and all the relationships and the peculiarities and the annoyances and the glories. And, why do I keep doing the Freddie and Paul show? Well, first of all, because Freddie and Nancy wouldn't want me to stop. And we did it before I did anything else on this channel. I thought about putting it on another channel where people wouldn't see it, but of course Freddie wouldn't be happy with that, and neither would Nancy. Why not share with them my little modicum of hierarchy, of status? And it's just richer if you know Freddie, and if you know Nancy, if you know Philip, the Bible, the Jesus man, and I have a hard time getting Reggie and Forrest. And John Van Donk comes on. It's the glory of each other. Oh, and then there's another guy. And you do a little... It's another popular professor. Well, look, this little club at University of Toronto, before either of them got famous, there they are having this conversation. And there's another conversation debate type thing that they had that wasn't recorded. Ah, shucks for that. But I've watched that video 4 or 5 times. It's a fascinating conversation. It's fun to listen to. But here they are. They're colleagues. And both of them are very popular professors. Both of them are more than just people, teaching data and things to students so they can go out and get a good job. These are men that are inspiring their students to think deeply and to love and to explore and to question and to challenge and to do all the kinds of things that should happen in a university. He's got his own story. We dig into that. Raised in a fundamentalist Christian situation that he walks away from, and he goes on his own journey into Buddhism and Taoism and Tai Chi and all of this stuff and meditation. I mean, he just goes through into all of that. What's he looking for? He's looking for what we're looking for everything. We're looking for God. We're looking for absolutely everything this life can afford and deliver. That's why I'm a Christian. I believe everything that this life can afford and deliver is found in Christ, and it's found in participating in the church and being the church and even beyond the church. And this is what life is about. So, he coined the meaning crisis, and he's still in the academy. He still has to write papers and teach classrooms and teach lectures, and he's working on his new video series about Socrates, and I really look forward to that. And he's also on a mission, and it's it's an analogous mission, but it's to ecologies of, it's to combat the meaning crisis. And this isn't very far from Jordan Peterson addressing nihilism-induced depression and nihilism in the individual, but John's more looking at groups of people and how can we have practices and ecology of practices and self-transcendence and all the fancy Vervaeke words, as Job calls them. Yesterday I saw, I watched PBS NewsHour, and I almost never watch TV news anymore, but I watched a little PBS NewsHour, and I was interested that they had a treatment of opioid addiction in St. Louis and the African American community. That's very interesting to me because of my history of Paterson, New Jersey, and here, and I just so they had some doctor on from the community, and I thought, this is just drivel. This is garbage. What I'm engaging when I listen to Christopher Mastropietro and John talking about the meaning crisis and drug addiction and all that I've learned about addiction and context and all of those things, none of that is dealt with on the news. Well, we're giving them more drugs, and we're trying to keep them from ODing. Oh, well, it's better than, I suppose, them ODing, but it's awfully thin soup. So why am I excited about this little corner of the internet? Because I've been blessed by John. It was Strawn who put me onto John, and I started talking about John on my channel, and oh no, Buddhism. The Christians got a little rankled at first, but then they settled down, and then no, he's not our enemy. I'm learning from him. He's an awfully gracious, productive conversation partner. Well, he's not a Christian, but I work with people who aren't Christians. I have non-Christians in my family. I have, on and on and on and on. Why can't I have a friendship? Why can't we have fellowship? Yeah, that's what this is about. Religion that's not a religion, an ecology of practices, on and on and on and on and on. It's fun, and critics of him, like, I'm gonna finally, I don't know, Mark Lefevre, are you coming up to Thunder Bay? I hope so. Gonna see Manuel in Europe. It'd be fun if Strawn could get up there. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll get to South Africa and Strawn can show me around. Won't that be fun? And yeah, there's a hierarchy. There's individuals, and it's often some of the first people I got to know. Luke and Sam and Job and Cassidy and Sevilla. And they see the problem is you start naming names. Is he going to name my name? And I'm sorry if I haven't named your name and you wish I would, but just slide it in here right now. I'll give you a little space, a little empty space. There, and put it in. But again, the point is that what we're longing for and hoping for is fellowship. It's not about getting it right, unless it is all the stuff that really matters, which is what fellowship and friendship and community, this knitting together that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians. That's what this is for. This is what we're trying to do. I'll get name wrongs, I'll get history wrong, I'll get philosophy wrong, I'll get all these things wrong. I'm not trying to, but I'm sure I will. But what do I want? I want us. And I'm not a content creator. YouTube keeps telling me that, even though I create a lot of content. And what is this for me? This is, in some ways, I love Dr. House when he was on. And y'all are my, Dr. House minions. Dr. House couldn't be Dr. House unless he had all these, underlings running around him, challenging him with questions that helped Dr. House be the person that he was. And like I said, when I was traveling on vacation, I missed talking to you. And so, open the fire hose. PVK's back in his office, and we'll see what happens in Europe. But talking to a machine helps me. What a strange thing. Well, I learned that when I started blogging, because I could keep a journal, but I never found journaling to be very good. So I'd sort of journal on CRC Voices and on my blog. And then, of course, thanks to Freddie, YouTube happened. And thanks to Jordan, and thanks to John, and thanks to Jonathan, and thanks to all of you. And so you're doing it wrong. I don't think I am. I'm getting exactly out of it what I want. I'm getting something of you. I can maybe only get a tiny little bit, but that's what I want. Because you have stuff, even if I'm wrong about all these things and not getting it right. And you're so frustrating, because I wish Paul would finally give up something or embrace something or become a Roman Catholic or become Orthodox or give up his Christianity or, embrace Hegel or Jung or Joe Biden or Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What do I care about? I want to see the renovation of the church. I want to see a renovation of the pastoral vocation. I want to see the realization of Jesus' prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This knitting together that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 1. That's what I care about. That's why I do this. And it's fun. And I'm loving it. I love the critique. I really do. You get all positive comments, and they're kind of boring, actually. You get a real zinger of a negative one. And sometimes you can, get a little twisted by it, but for the most part, it's fun. Would I rather you turn away from your screens, make some friends, learn to pray, grow a garden, start a family, build a vocation, love God with your heart, soul, mind, strength, and your neighbor as yourself? Yes. If someone comes up to me and says, I used to watch on YouTube, and then I put all that stuff away, and here's my garden, here's my family, here's my children, here's my church. Thank you. You were there when I needed you. And now I've moved on to other things. Amen. But if you still want to play along, if the content from this little corner of the internet helps you do this, and if you need something to, if you're like me and you need something to listen to while you garden, in knowing more people helps you pray, and maybe, you'll find someone on Bridges of Matchmaking and you'll start a family and you'll build a vocation, and you're coding all day and it's good to have something to listen to. And somehow I am helpful for you to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Well, that's just glory. That's just delightful. That's just beautiful. So keep watching and listen and participate. And again, the sadness of this limited fallen world is that we can't have all of the fellowship that we might have. Not here, not now, but in the resurrection, in the life of the age to come, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. At that point, come up to me and say, Paul, you've got hair. Oh, and not on your chin. Come up to say, I used to watch your videos. You helped me. And I'll say, tell me how. Well, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and these things happened. And God was working through even the hard things, even the difficult things. But what he was doing in me was building a capacity for love and glory and fellowship that in my stinted little self I had no imagination for. And so he took the good things and he took the hard things and he made out of them a me that he could perfect in glory, that would be useful for him and whatever meaningful things he has for us on the other side of the grave. I didn't expect to have all this in this video. Every now and then I get a little triggered and do one of these videos, and I think, should I do that? I don't know if I should do it, but I got to learn to listen to my heart too. So anyway, that's 3 critiques and why it's good and what this little corner of the internet is really about. So let me know what you think in the comment section.